Welcome to Voices in Leadership, live streamed worldwide from the Leadership Studio at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. I'm Dean Michelle Williams. The goal of Voices is to highlight the experiences of leaders confronting major public health frontiers and to better understand effective leadership and how it can affect change. I hope you find this program engaging and informative. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon and welcome to our audience here in the studio and to our viewers online around the globe. I'm Erik Anderson, the Director of Voices in Leadership. This series focuses on the lessons of effective leadership to create positive change in public health. Today we host a discussion on bipartisan solutions to climate change with Bob Inglis and Gina McCarthy. Bob Inglis represented the 4th Congressional District of South Carolina from 1993 to 1998 and again from 2005 to 2010. A member of the House Science Committee who served as ranking member of the Energy and Environment Subcommittee, Inglis initially opposed efforts to address climate change. But interactions with scientists in Antarctica, Australia, and elsewhere, along with encouragement from his 5 children, changed his views, and he became an advocate for carbon tax to reduce dependence on fossil fuels. In Washington and South Carolina, Inglis's acknowledgement of the scientific reality of climate change drew intense criticism from the Republican Party. And in June 2010, he was defeated for re-election in the Republican primary. In 2011, he founded the Energy and Enterprise Institute, rebranded in 2014 as republicEn, to encourage conservatives to accept the reality of climate change and to promote market-based innovations to address the challenges that it poses. Before I turn this discussion over to our moderator, the former EPA administrator, and a member of our faculty here, Gina McCarthy, please join me as we welcome Congressman Bob Inglis to the Voices in Leadership series at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and it's great to be here with you, Congressman Inglis. Let me give you your first tough question. Can I call you Bob?
Please.
Okay, great.
It's a name I can keep. Yeah.
Because, well, one of the reasons is that you're a very genuine human being, and one of your best qualities, in my opinion, is your courage. And I want people to get to know you as much as possible. And I thought we should talk about sort of 2 separate parts of your life. One is, how did you turn from a climate denier to somebody who recognizes the science on climate change and actually wants to move to a carbon tax? And then what are you doing now? Because I think both of those areas hold a lot of lessons for all of us. So let's start with the first. What was that metamorphosis that you went through, and why? And I have to hand it to you. When you lost in your primary, and you lost almost 3-1, and I'm not saying that to make you feel bad, but just because he called it a spectacular faceplant. I gotta love this guy. So you have not lost your sense of humor even in a tough time. So tell me about the metamorphosis.
Well, let's see. For the first 6 years I was in Congress, I said that climate change was nonsense. All I knew was Al Gore was for it. And that was the end of the inquiry, you know, because I represented a very red district in South Carolina. Probably the reddest district in the reddest state in the nation. Some places I pulled that punch, Idaho, Texas, but here in Massachusetts I can definitely challenge anybody to prove that. Anyway, so very red district, and it was just, I admit it's ignorant, but it was the way that I just moved on to the next issue, you know, is Al's for it, I'm against it, next issue. So that was my first 6 years. Then I was out of Congress for 6 years doing commercial real estate law again in Greenville, South Carolina, and running for the House again in 2004. So my son came to me, the eldest of our 5 children. He just turned 18, so he's voting for the first time. And he said to me, "Dad, I'll vote for you, but you're going to clean up your act on the environment." He was not making a classic interest group threat, you know. I mean, he was going to vote for me no matter what. I mean, what if we'd lost by 1 vote? It wasn't in his economic interest to vote against me. And so because he knew that we were mortgaging the farmette that we lived on in order to...
Definitely, it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah. He knew that how are we going to pay tuition, you know, Robert, if I go down to defeat. But he was really saying, "Dad, I love you, and you can be better than you were before. So how about make this Inglis 2.0, the new and improved version? So his 4 sisters agreed, his mother agreed, new constituency, you know, very important constituency to respond to. Change the locks on the doors, you know. So anyway, so that was the first step of this 3-step metamorphosis. Second step was going to Antarctica and seeing the evidence in the ice core drillings. And then the third step was another science committee trip, Great Barrier Reef, Aussie climate scientist named Scott Heron showing us the glories of the reef and its challenges with coral bleaching. You know, the very sad thing is by 2050, 90% of the Earth's corals may be dead. And so, because of a 1-degree rise in the water temperature. And so he's showing us all this, and I can tell that he and I share a worldview. He's now a very dear friend, but even not really knowing him, I knew that we shared a worldview because I could see that he was worshiping God in what he was showing me. You know, St. Francis of Assisi said, preach the gospel at all times, if necessary, use words. And so Scott was preaching the gospel, and I could see it in his eyes, I could hear it in his voice. It's written all over his face that he was worshiping God and what he was showing me. And so I knew we shared worldview. Later we had a chance to talk, and he told me about conservation changes he's making in his life in order to love God and love people. He rides his bike to work, some things that my conservative friends might find silly. He does without air conditioning as much as his wife and 3 daughters will allow him in Townsville, Australia, a very hot place. And he tries to do without the electric dryer. All in order to consciously love people coming after us. And so I got right inspired. I want to be like Scott, loving God and loving people. And so I came home and introduced the Raise Wages, Cut Carbon Act of 2009. That's a revenue neutral, border adjustable carbon tax.
You could have changed the name to be a little bit more discreet,
maybe,
but that's okay.
So note to self, do not introduce carbon tax in reddest district of reddest state of nation in the midst of the Great Recession. It will not go well. And it did not go well at all. So after 12 years in Congress, as you just mentioned, I got 29% of the vote, and the other guy got 71% of the vote. So spectacular faceplant at that point. But since then, I've been out persuading conservatives that this is not a heresy, that it's actually bedrock conservatism.
Before we get to that, can I ask you how did you how'd you come out of the closet?
Well,
and when? I mean, how did you decide to do that?
Yeah, it was. I'd successfully branded, I think, as the energy security guy in my second time in Congress. Inglis 2.0, we called it, the new and improved version. And so it was all consistent with that energy security message. But then as the climate thing became more and more real to me, more and more evident, that's when I saw the carbon tax as an elegant solution, better than cap and trade, frankly. And so I was going to vote against cap and trade, Waxman-Markey. And I felt, maybe it's sort of a Boy Scout notion, but if you're going to oppose something, it's incumbent upon you to propose the alternative. And so I was going to vote against Waxman-Markey. And so I felt that I needed to propose the alternative. And that's where it really became clear that I had maybe crossed to the other team in some conservatives' minds. Yeah. Again, it's in the midst of the Great Recession, though. It's completely different than it is now. Those were very dark times.
Yeah, well, and they definitely have moved beyond, but what direction, I think, and whether it's helpful is a matter of debate at this point. But, you know, one of the things that I was just really curious about is, did you face any community opposition at that? Did it actually immediately impact your leadership ability at home to take that kind of a position in Congress? Yeah,
you know, they were having a tea party in June of 2010 as that primary came on. Right. I was specifically uninvited to the tea party. And so, yeah, there was just this sort of sense, and I can understand why. I mean, I seemed to be focused on something that was a decade or 2 or 3 away. And people in my district were focused on this month's mortgage payment, this month's paycheck. Yeah. The financial system is coming apart. And the big thing, Gina, I think, is that we had found another institution we shouldn't trust. We already had government on the list and the church on the list. Now we're adding the banking system to the list. And so this enormous high tide of discontent and distrust. And basically everybody going to their own devices and trying to figure out their own way rather than believing in a joint quest for truth, you know, and figuring things out together.
I found that your learning experience in your travels to be really, and correct me if I'm wrong, about two things. It brought you out of your what we all think of comfort zone and presented you with really a real experience about what might be happening as a result of climate change. But the second thing was your interest in relating to the individual who was talking.
Yeah.
And the importance of bringing that back to your faith.
Yeah.
Because we chatted about how climate change isn't a belief system,
Yeah.
although your response based on your faith may be different.
Right.
Can you explain to me what was most important for you as a leader? Or were they both sort of meshed together because you're a person?
Yeah, well, you know, people ask me if I believe in climate change, and I tell them, no, I don't believe in climate change. It's not worthy of belief. All it is some data. And my faith informs my reaction to the data, but it's just data. And so, but there are some people that are particularly good at presenting the data. So I've mentioned my friend Scott Herron, who has become a very dear friend. There's another scientist who had an impact on me in that first trip to Antarctica, a guy named Donald Manahan at USC. The other one we call it South Carolina. We've got a USC, but this is the other one out in California. And so Donald is this master teacher. And so he'd hear a question from John McCain's group that was in Antarctica at the same time. There's sort of the postdoc level, and he'd go there. And then he'd hear my question from the GED level. And without condescension, he'd go there to answer the question. Really, he's an amazing teacher, Donald Manahan is. And so here's a strange thing. He said to me he needed to go call his mother. He had an aging and ailing mother. I had an aging and ailing mother at the time. And it made me more able to hear his science. Isn't it really strange? But we're human beings, and the reality was that Donald, caring about his mother, showed me that this great scientist was actually a fellow human being, a fellow traveler, who was caring for his mother. And so it made me able to hear his science. So that's be hard, isn't it, to get people on board when we've got to go talk about their mothers and everything. But it is.
No, but it's
just
about relationships and trust.
It's a reality, yeah. So we're trying to build trust for, you know, and I ask all the time, how can you trust a scientist? Because they're getting the grants from the government, and they're just going to give the government the results that they ask for. And you know, you talk to scientists and you realize that that's not who they are. Who they are is people in this quest for information. They don't assume anything, and they challenge their results constantly, and it's really quite inspiring if you get into that sort of thing. And so that's what we need to do, is sort of build that trust in this process.
Well, as a bridge to the second half of the conversation, explain to me how you see religion factoring in at this point in debates about climate change and other things, because I think many of us don't come from the same background.
Right.
But certainly many of us believe that climate change is about the natural resources God gave us.
Yeah.
But beyond that, what do you see as the religious both pros and cons in terms of the tenor of today?
Well, perhaps my friend Jen Inhofe is watching, so let me have the conversation I'd like to have with him.
Not if he knows I'm on here.
But if Senator Inhofe is listening, here's what I'd like to say. Jim is a very dear Christian believer who's a very sincere man. And I know that he's somebody who believes in God's sovereignty. And I would say to him, I agree, God is sovereign in all things. And so if I'm putting stuff in the creek that's killing your cattle, Senator Inhofe, if God wills it, he could clean it up and it wouldn't kill your cattle. And I would think that Jim, my friend, would recoil at that. He'd say, no, Inglis, listen, you got to be responsible, man. God is sovereign, but humans are responsible. You got to hold that in tension. You can't reconcile those two things. I mean, it's, we believe Christ is divine, Christ is human. You can't reconcile this. You can't reconcile God's sovereignty with man's responsibility. So he would clearly, I think, come to the conclusion with me that, oh yeah, you've got to be responsible, Inglis. You can't put your effluent in the creek killing my cattle. You got to control that effluent. And so I think that's where it comes from, is this sense that for many people, like, and he is a friend, Jim Inhofe, he sees us as arrogant in saying that we humans can determine the longevity of the earth. He sees that as an arrogant attack on the prominence of God and the significance of God. And so what I would like to talk to him about is, no, it's really not the way it is. The way it is we're trying to understand our responsibility in this incredible bit of Eden that's left, and to maintain it and to shepherd it.
Well, I know that there are a lot of, religious groups like the Evangelical Environmental Network and others that certainly we've both worked with, that try to get sort of into that discussion,
Right.
certainly much more. So tell me, how are you spending your time now? Because you haven't moved in your position. There's no second metamorphosis that I'm aware of. And you've done some really great things, including win the Profiles in Courage Award, which is, for folks like me, a high honor, and it should be for you. So what are you doing now?
Well, we're a team of 6 conservatives out to convince fellow conservatives to overcome an undeserved inferiority complex. Apparently, we conservatives think we're no good when it comes to energy and climate. And so when the topic comes up, we shrink in science denial. And so what we live to do at republicEn.org is show them, no, you're very good. You know the answer. You're the kid in class with the answer. Raise your hand. Internalize the negative externalities. And then watch the free enterprise system deliver innovation faster than government mandates or regulations or fickle tax incentives could ever imagine. So we believe this is a problem of economics that has an environmental consequence. That I, at Inglis Coal-Fired Electricity, get away with socializing my soot and socializing my CO2. And we conservatives don't believe in socializing anything, so we believe in individual responsibility and reward and effort and risk and reward, and so internalize those negative externalities. Make me at Inglis Coal-Fired Electricity fully accountable for the damages I'm causing in the lungs of my neighbors and in the climate impacts that I'm having. If you put that on the meter and at the gas pump, there'd be no need for all of the very inefficient ways we've got of propping up wind and propping up solar and propping up electric cars. Just be a level playing field, and in the liberty of enlightened self-interest, consumers would seek their self-interest, and there'd be entrepreneurs and inventors delivering technology that brings us distributed energy systems that light up the world with more energy, more mobility, more freedom. Give me an amen, I'll stop preaching. I mean, I'm going to get to this point. In other words, we really believe...
But you talk about Milton Friedman a lot. I mean, what you're trying to really do is to go back to the base of the Republican Party, what conservatives have embraced.
Right, so we love to play a clip of Milton Friedman on the Phil Donahue show in the 1980s. I see some students here that won't remember. Phil Donahue basically was a white guy doing an Oprah.
He was married to Marlo Thomas, maybe.
They used to get on and spar with one another, Phil a liberal and Dr. Friedman, of course, the Chicago School of Economics, rather conservative Reagan advisor. And so, well, what do you want to do about pollution then, Dr. Friedman, if you don't want to regulate it? And Friedman says, well, you tax it, of course. That's how you deal with pollution. And it then goes on to explain very eloquently how to internalize negative externalities. So we like to show that clip to conservatives. And people who are actual conservatives say, oh yeah, we know we're supposed to bow at the mention of Dr. Friedman's name, you know? I mean, it's like he's a patron saint of the Republican Party before it was captured by populist nationalists. And so, we think we've got a case to be made for conservatives, actual conservatives, that remind them that this is what they really believe. And if this sounds familiar to some in the audience that maybe aren't as conservative as me, it might be because it's the same thing that Al Gore has been for about 30 years, which is why we believe we can bring America together.
Strange bedfellows.
Yeah, because the reality is that it is something that Al Gore has been for about 30 years. And so it's just a matter of overcoming this current tribal moment that we're stuck in. And I happen to believe that climate change may be the issue that could cause us to come up out of this terrible tribal swamp, where we might come to realize that we literally are in it together.
Well, it's our common home. We can't go anywhere else.
Yes, and really, if it's true, and it is true, that Al Gore has been for the same thing for 30 years, then why not join together and say we can fix this? And it's bedrock conservatism, but it's also people on the progressive side that believe in innovation.
Well, I know I have one question I really want to get to, and that is, how are people reacting to you? Where do you go with this message, and how do they react to you? Any fun stories?
Well, yeah, the fun stories are where you see the light bulb go on, you know. You teach, and there are other teachers here. When you see the light bulb going on, that's where it's really exciting. Of course, we do encounter opposition. Some of it, we'd like to think now we're getting a little bit of paid opposition, which is pretty exciting. It's like when you're in a challenge race and you suddenly start getting tailed by the incumbents people, that's when you know you're getting close to him or her. And so we hope that increases. But it is, what we try to do is go to conservative audiences. Our big challenge is that people who self-select into a climate conversation typically are progressives. But recently I was at the Citadel, South Carolina's military college, for example, and the audience, based on a poll everywhere device that we use, was 93% Republican. And only 40% believed that climate change was real and human caused. And so I told them, I am in the right place. I'm exactly where I need to be talking to you. And you are the most important people on the planet. Because if you join this, we can solve it. If you don't, we can't. And so that's when I get excited, is when I'm in front of a group of conservatives who maybe haven't heard the Milton Friedman language yet. What they've heard is a language of scarcity and walking and eating bugs and feeling guilty. I mean, that's what they perceive of the environmental left. That's not what the environmental left is saying, but it's how they're perceived by the right. And so we get there and we project a very different message, and then they're able to say, yeah, this is us. We could be for this. And so we realize that it starts with a few people out on the street singing the song, you strike up the band, and then elected officials will typically go out front to lead that parade once the parade's going.
Yeah, that's true.
But
that's not exactly a profile in color.
no, but typically they don't step off that curb until they hear the brass band.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And so we know that we've got to sing solo for a while, get the quartet going, get the band, and then they'll feel supported and they will lead to the solution.
So give us a little bit of hope and projections of the future. Are things changing a bit? I know that certainly your state and many others are feeling the crunch from climate, so it's not as if, at least I'm not seeing a lot of people deny that the climate is changing, but is there hope for people to get it out of partisan politics and into our homes in a normal conversation again? How do we embrace this common challenge we face?
Yeah, there is hope. So for example, I was in Charleston recently for the start of our 14-city Encourage tour this fall. And so 2 women at a Republican Women's Club said to me before it started, they said, the water is coming up into our yards. And I could tell that these were people who probably had nice houses. These were not down and out folks. These were folks who probably had a nice house. The water's coming up, and so what I would say to you is what the hope is the difference between now and 2009, when I was introducing the Raise Wages, Cut Carbon Act in 2009, the differences are substantial. Mm-hmm. That was in the midst of the Great Recession. The economy is much better now. That was before we had all these many experiences with climate change. We're all being taught the reality of climate change. So for example, if you're in North Carolina GOP convention this coming year, I bet it's not a good idea to make a climate change joke after Florence came and visited. And then the other thing that's very different is there is a growing eco-right, we call it. There's this enormous left wing in this country called the environmental left. We've got a teeny-weeny right wing called the eco-right, which we're part of. The bird doesn't fly straight, as you can see, because this is a very hard. And so as we grow this eco-right, it's amazing the growth over here compared to 2009. In 2009, I introduced a bill, and as I told you earlier, an economist with the Heritage Foundation had produced a study within 48 hours. It says that my bill would destroy the American civilization, basically. And it's a remarkable ability to produce that study so quickly. But now then, we've got a number of groups, R Street Institute, Niskanen Center, Clear Path, Alliance for Market Solutions, us at republicEn.org, the Climate Leadership Council, Students for Carbon Dividends. I mean, you keep going, the eco-right is growing. And so that's tremendously important because now Carlos Curbelo, a representative from Florida, has introduced a bill. And it actually appears it's going to help him. I mean, not just in the primary, but also in the general. And so there's a learning experience that will come from that, from elected officials saying, hey, you know what, maybe our people are experiencing it, the economy is better, and we've got support on the right now. Let's look into it.
I think that there are many people in the United States that are looking for courageous leaders and are going to reward that even if they're not exactly espousing what they might want. But I think the most important thing that I need to ask you now is, when are we going to get a carbon tax? I need a prediction. Give me a year.
Okay, I'll give you a prediction. Okay, here it goes. We think by 2022, we can have 25 House Republicans and 15 Senate Republicans ready to support meaningful action on climate change. That's our singular objective, and then we plan on disbanding. So we have this singular.
This isn't your career for the rest
no,
of your life?
No, this is the idea is to finish this by 2022, and so we want to build this community of support, and then accomplish the objective by 2022, and then go do something else. Actually, what I'd like to do then is sell some products in this very exciting marketplace, accountable marketplace, because there's going to be a really exciting opportunity once we internalize the negative externalities.
I keep telling people that a low-carbon future does a lot of things for us, including it's healthier, well-being will increase, the economy will get more equitable, there'll be opportunities and jobs. It's really nice to embrace it together.
And imagine the impact around the world is people having one less reason to fight with their neighbors because now they've got a source of energy.
Well, I want everybody to join me in thanking a courageous leader, Bob Inglis, for all of his tremendous work. I am excited to let you know that these discussions will continue, because on October 19th, there'll be a forum about the conflicts over science and policy at the EPA. Guess what? I'll be part of that. Surprise, surprise. But please join me in thanking Bob, not just for his early courage, but the fact that he's turning that courage into solutions and discussions that hopefully will bring this country together. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you very much.